So I grew up in northern New Mexico, in Los Alamos. Got my bachelor's and master's down at New Mexico State in biology. And then I worked at the lab for a little bit and then went to University of Illinois for graduate work. About 4 years into my graduate work, Buddy and I started a company, and I didn't finish my PhD because we got SBIR funding. And I'll talk more about that towards the end of this, but I've kind of been in this SBIR world for the last 20 years. I've gotten, I guess, 12 phase 1s and 5 or 6 phase 2s, and we'll talk about what that means. But I've done this a lot, and then I've helped over 200 companies submit proposals, and lots of them have gotten funding, and we'll talk about that later too. So I'm not just somebody who talks about this stuff. I'm somebody who's done it a lot. Right. So here's a quick outline. We're going to talk about the SBIR program first, how it works, and a lot of the details about it. Then we're going to talk about the New Mexico FAST program, and then we're going to talk about my companies a little bit and talk about how you do this and turn it into a real company and be successful at it. There are lots of ways to fund your company. The most common way is to bootstrap it or use your friends and family. This is difficult and it has its hazards because chances are your business is going to fail and you won't have money to give back to your parents or whatever. Angel investments happen sometimes, but it's usually because of a good relationship and it's usually expensive. Venture capital can happen, but usually you have to be a little bit further down the road. And we can make these slides available. So, and venture capital is expensive, and not only is it expensive, but in my experience, it changes the whole dynamics of a business and makes it so the whole goal is to exit instead of to enjoy your business and have fun doing stuff. Sometimes you can do corporate partnerships. I've been in a few of them. Usually you have to be further along. It's real rare that a startup would have that kind of access to a corporation. And then there's this small business innovative research thing, this SBIR program. It's equity-free money. It's designated by Congress that all of the research organizations have to put 3% of their budget, 3.2% of their budget into small businesses. And so there are a bunch of organizations, and we'll go through all of those, that are required to spend this money on small businesses that are doing innovative research. And you need to keep that in mind. It has to be innovative research. This is not easy money to get. It's really competitive, and you have to be doing something novel and cool. Why would you do an SBIR? Well, like I said, it's equity-free investment in your company. There's nowhere else that you can get that. It's competitive and it's hard to get, but it's equity-free. It allows you to demonstrate feasibility of your idea. And so if you want to get follow-on funding from angels or venture capital, it's really nice to have an SBIR to show that some agency believed in you and gave you money to start developing your business. It allows you to start building a team. If you're 2 people and you need somebody on the business development side, there's a little bit of money here to bring somebody in to help you start building your team and building a real company. And then, like I said, it provides due diligence for follow-on funding. If a VC sees that you got a phase 1 and a phase 2 SBIR, they're much more interested in funding you than if you haven't had any investment. So the SBIR program, is to support scientific excellence and technological innovation through the investment of federal research funds in critical American priorities to build a strong national economy, one small business at a time. So this is really a neat program, right? I think Reagan started it back in the 80s, and he said, we really need to invest in small businesses. And what we want to do is make them be the innovators, because large companies aren't real good at innovation. So the goals are to meet federal R&D needs by giving money to small businesses, increase private sector commercialization of innovations, stimulate technological innovation. So, I mean, a lot of the companies that do this are coming out of research institutions and have brilliant ideas doing new things, and they need to get started. So it's an easy way to get a company started. And they want to foster and encourage participation in innovation and entrepreneurship. And the economically and socially disadvantaged people are really encouraged to do this. And so that's part of our mission with the New Mexico FAST program, is to help New Mexico innovate and be entrepreneurial.
What does that stand for, FAST?
Federal.
Okay.
Money quick.
We'll see it later. That's really bad. So the SBIR program overview supports R&D. So this is really early stage stuff, brand new ideas that are innovative and different from anybody else. Research and development, sorry. I always harp on people to not use acronyms and spell them out, so that's bad. So there's about a $2.5 billion set aside annually for this program. It's 3.2% of the extramural research budget of any of the agencies that have a budget greater than 100 million per year. And so that's 12 different agencies are required to spend 3.2% of their budget on small businesses. About 160,000 awards were granted last year. So there are a lot of them. On the other hand, the success rate for applications is about 14% across all of the agencies. So it's really competitive to get these things. And so if you're going to bother to apply, you ought to put some real effort into it and get some help from people who know what they're doing, and use us because we're free. And I mean, it's worth the effort, but you better put the effort in or you're not going to be competitive. Here's the agencies that are required to fund people. Department of Agriculture is doing much more rural investment stuff nowadays, and so they might be interesting down here. Department of Commerce has NIST and NOAA, National Institute of Science or Standards and Technology, and National Oceanographic Administration. Department of Defense is huge. Department of Education is fairly small, but they've funded some neat things that I've seen. Department of Energy might be interesting to some of you. Health and Human Services is the National Institutes of Health and CDC. Department of Homeland Security, Department of Transportation, EPA, NASA, and the National Science Foundation. And we'll talk about how different these agencies are. I keep going to the national SBIR meetings, and they say that they're trying to make all of these programs be more similar, and every year they get less similar. So we'll try and touch on some of the stuff that's different about them, but when it comes down to it, you really have to do some research and figure stuff out. And you can always come to me or our partners at the NMFAST program, and we can help you navigate all of this.
But I have a question.
Yes.
Give us one example of one of the agencies that you helped and what kind of added came out of that.
So I'll go into all of the agencies that I've worked with
Okay.
later, but I've worked with several of them, and then I've helped people write proposals for every one of these agencies. And so, I mean, I'm kind of unique in that way that I've worked with all of the agencies. So if somebody has a question about any of them, I either know the answer or know how to figure out the answer much quicker than if you had to do it yourself, because I've done this a lot. So here's just a pie chart of the different agencies. NIH, the National Institutes of Health, which is on here is HHS, and DOD have the huge amounts of funds, whereas the other agencies are much smaller. But NASA and DOE have quite a bit of money. National Science Foundation has quite a bit of money. And we'll talk about why you would want to apply to different agencies for different things in a little bit. Data rights and IP protection. Anything that you develop in the SBIR program, you retain the data rights. The government has limited use of those data rights. They actually have the ability to, like if you were Department of Defense and you developed something that they needed to scale up real big and you weren't capable of doing it, they can make you work with another company and stuff, but they've never done that yet. And it's been around for 20 years. So,
Could you say that again, please?
Which part?
Just the last part about what they would make you do.
Well, so I had a friend who developed a new filter for gas masks, and the Army said, we want to make 1 million of these. And he said, I can't make 1 million of these. And they said, well, we're going to recommend somebody that could do this. Will you work with them? And he said, yes. And he worked with them, and then he made an awful lot of money. But if he would have said no, the Army has the right to go ahead and find a manufacturer and do something with it. But they've never done that.
Because the friend that got an SBIR award.
Yeah.
That's the reason to connect.
Yep. So for the most part, you're completely protected with your IP unless there's some sort of emergency. And that's never happened. They've always found a way to do it. So the SBIR program is a gated program. There's a phase 1 where you do a demonstration of feasibility. It's a small amount of money for a short period of time, and it varies by agency. Then it goes to a phase 2, which is a decent amount of money for 2 years or so, depending on the agency. And then it goes to a phase 3. The phase 3 is not actually part of the SBIR program, but it's a commercialization part of this. Some of the agencies will help you with the phase 3. Some of them just dump you after the phase 2, and it's up to you to figure out how to do the phase 3. And I'll talk about some of the nuances of this. It's an interesting program because it seems like it's incredibly structured, but there are variances that happen, and all kinds of weird things can happen as you go through all of this. So phase 1 is 100 to 225K over 6 to 12 months, about 15% success rate of submission. Phase 2 is for prototype development. So after you've demonstrated feasibility in phase 1, you get money to develop your prototype. Ranges from 500,000 to 1.5 million, usually 2 years. It's about a 45% success rate of submission. In my experience, if you did what you were supposed to in the phase 1 and you communicated with your technical people and you did a good job and made them happy, you will get a phase 2. if you failed in your phase 1, then you won't get a phase 2. And that's not always true. And in fact, at University of Illinois at the research park, we had an 80% success rate of companies going from a phase 1 to a phase 2. There's limited direct funding for phase 3. The Department of Defense is a little bit different than that. NIH can be a little bit different than that. Some of the other organizations like NSF, you're probably not going to get any funding for phase 3. Some SBIR myths. Well, it's not a fast program. It takes a while, and it's not going to get you to the market quickly. Like I said, the program is not the same across the board. Every agency is different, and some of the agency differences are huge. And so you have to understand who you're applying to and what it means. It's too difficult and not worth the money. Well, it is difficult, and it's really challenging, and it's really competitive, but it's free money, kind of, right? I mean, it's a huge investment of your time and your effort, but they aren't taking any equity in your company. It's convoluted and there is no guidance. Well, it is convoluted for sure, but there is lots of guidance, and we've got people here in the state that have experience doing this and can help you through this for free. So use us as resources. We've done this a lot, some of us. Why pursue SBIR funding? Well, it's the government seed fund program. This is set up to help small businesses succeed. Their job is to help you succeed. They don't want you to fail, they want you to win. So they're trying to fund you to help you build a successful small business. It's risk-free dollars. If it doesn't work, you were doing something innovative. They knew that. They knew it was high risk. That's what the program is for. I've failed at several of them, been successful at several. It's a really nice way to do things. Non-diluted funding. That's the kind of key here. Is it's free money that doesn't cost you anything in your business. Company retains full data rights. Government won't disclose data for at least 4 years after full program completion, and they don't disclose data. They just don't. I mean, that's not something to worry about in my experience anyway. At least with DoD and NASA, you have a priority position for sole source sales to the government. And if you have a sole source contract for the Department of Defense, you may be set up for the rest of your life. I'm working with a company right now that's half in Illinois and half out in California, and they're setting up a sole source contract to do a software project. And I mean, they're going to be set for life because they don't have to compete with Northrop or any of the big companies. They are the only source for this software project, and the military needs it. So it's a really nice place to be. And you can fail up to 75% of these things, and there's no penalty for it. But if you fail more than 75% of your projects, they start not being happy with you. Participating agencies. So these are all of the agencies that are part of this program. National Science Foundation will fund anything that's scientific or engineering that's novel. I've been told by the program managers at National Science Foundation that they will fund anything other than drug discovery and clinical trials, which is NIH. So if you have some innovative idea in any field and you send it into them, they will generate a topic area for you if they have to. Anything that's innovative, that's not drug discovery or clinical trials, is fair game. So they're kind of the catch-all of all the programs. Department of Defense is for support for warfighters in the field, risk mitigation, cyber, healthcare. They have very specific topics, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. NASA obviously is to support space missions. The long endurance flight and health issues are big right now, so environmental monitoring and stuff like that are real big topics for NASA right now. HHS or NIH is all things about health, and I mean, they cover a huge range of topics. They're a really large agency. Department of Energy is all things related to energy, obviously. Department of Ed is education. There's a large focus on STEM education, but they also cover a lot of things that you may not think they would cover. Department of Homeland Security is critical infrastructure, borders and perimeters. DOT, Department of Transportation, they do a lot of interesting things. Their topics are always a little bit off the wall. I think a lot of them are designed for specific companies. EPA, Environmental and Green Tech. EPA doesn't really have a very big research budget anymore lately, so it's pretty limited. USDA is Food and Agriculture. They allow you to do things that are commercial off the shelf combinations of products and stuff. They do lots of rural stuff now. They've funded a lot of interesting things in the last couple of years. NOAA is Air and Ocean Protection, Monitoring, and Mitigation, and NIST is Standard Space Science for Technology, Advanced Manufacturing, Cybersecurity, stuff like that. So you can see between these 12 agencies, it covers just about anything you would ever want to propose that's an innovative solution to a problem. And I think we need to keep in mind through this whole thing that that's the key to this is innovation. Is you really have to have an innovative solution to a problem and then convince somebody that they should fund you because of it. Agency differences. Oh, the submission processes vary for every single agency. The proposal requirements vary, formats, layouts, page counts, contact expectations. So one of the things that you can do is take the same proposal and submit it to different agencies. And if you do that, all of the formatting is going to change a little bit, but it's not drastic. If you do submit the same proposal to two different agencies, you can't be funded by both. You can only accept the funding from one of them, but it increases your chances of getting funding. The funding levels vary for all of the agencies. The period of performance varies for all of the agencies. And some of the National Science Foundation is now open year-round for accepting proposals. NIH has 3 dates per year. Department of Defense has 3, usually maybe 4. And then most of the rest of the agencies have just 1 submission date per year. And since we're a small group, if anybody ever has any questions, just stop me and ask. Yes, ma'am.
You said that usually if it's 75% if you fail on your project, then there's really no penalty. What if it's more than 75% and then you're on your blacklist, or
Well,
affect your credit?
No, it doesn't affect your credit. It doesn't affect you at all. It's just if you applied 10 times and gotten accepted 10 times, and 8 of those you didn't get results on, they don't want to give you more money.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's kind of blacklisting, but
Is
not
there a
really.
limit? Is there a limit of how many times you can apply?
No. So, I mean, again, these are all loaded questions because like National Science Foundation allows you to apply once a year per primary investigator. So you can apply twice per year, but it has to be 2 different principal investigators.
Okay.
NASA allows you to apply for up to 10 a year. DOD has no limit per se. On the other hand, they all want to make sure that you're focused on the project that you're working on. And so they don't want you to be doing a bunch of different things. They want you to be doing one thing and doing it well to be successful, because that's their goal, is for you to be successful as a business, not to give you a bunch of $150,000 payouts so you can just do research for years. So, I mean, I think when I started doing this, it was a little bit different, and now they're really focused on you being a successful business. So you can do this for a very long time, and I'll show you that there's ways to do this in neat ways, but really they want you to be a successful small business. So, you know, National Science Foundation says you can do 2 projects a year, but when it comes down to it, they say, no, you're focusing on this one. You're going to put all your time into it. They say, you know, one of the, we'll talk about this in a minute, but one of the requirements is the principal investigator has to be at least 51% employed with a small business, which means you can't be full-time in another job. You're not allowed to be. And in fact, NSF, they don't even care about the 51%. They want you to be full-time on this project, going full bore to make this a successful company. So even though the rules say certain things, some of it's a little bit different than what it says, in my experience.
Are you able to satisfy that other ways by having a co-partner or somebody else on the team and take some of that responsibility?
The PI has to be more than 50%. It's just
PI is what?
principal investigator. So you have to have somebody that's more than 50%, and it excludes you from having a full-time position. And that has to be from the beginning of the project to the end of the project. So you can't even say, well, I'll just do 6 months of summer months in 3 months.
What if your project is, this goes to a different question really, it goes faster than the timetable, the phases and so forth, and you actually accomplish your prototypes in 3 weeks, or you know, and you move on, and you actually maybe even get some other investors, because how is that?
So I've done that, and I've seen lots of other companies do that, and it varies a little bit by agency, but their goal is for you to be successful. And so I've talked to the people at the National Science Foundation, and they've had people that got huge investments at the end of phase 1 and said, well, you know, maybe we don't need the phase 2 project. And the NSF said, no, I think you should use that money to do something that helps this project, because we want to make sure you're successful.
They wouldn't hinder you anyway.
They will not hinder you.
Other money and start production, and then use their money to refine the product.
Yeah, I mean,
the equipment used to make it. Or...
So like National Science Foundation is not going to be your customer. They want you to be successful and generate tax revenue. That's the whole point. And so they will do anything they can to help you. I mean, they'll even bring in other agencies to help fund you. Their goal is to make you successful. So no, they will, there's no penalty for being successful, in my experience. Which is nice, because I mean, I think we all kind of worry about that a little bit, but.
Well, you may have a penalty for being already successful in one thing, you're now wanting to set a second thing up.
Well,
that rule you just mentioned,
Yeah, and one of the things that we've run into is sometimes people put in an application and they don't hear for 6 months. And in that 6 months, they've made a huge breakthrough and gotten a big investment or started selling product even.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the whole thing is, and I'll bring this up like 20 times in this talk, it's all about communication with the agency. If you tell them what's going on and you're being successful, they will alter things, they will do anything they can to help you. But you have to tell them what's going on and you have to be real clear about it. And I think anytime you can communicate with these people, it's critical for your success. So that, you know, if you accidentally got an investment and sold 100,000 units, they're not going to hurt you for that. They're going to do anything they can to help. They just want you to be successful. So the difference between grants and contracts. Some of the agencies do contracts, some of the agencies do grants, some of the agencies do both. And on the next slide, we'll see what those are. Grants are usually less specific topics, like NSF doesn't even have specific topics. Well, they have like 10 topic areas that cover just about everything, and they say that they'll cover whatever you want. You get to define the scope of work pretty clearly in a grant. It's more flexible in the use of the funds. The contracts, they will follow how you're spending the money, whereas grants, they don't. With a contract, it requires the delivery of a promised good. So there's something at the end of it, whereas a grant, they just want you to do good research. I guess the other ones are kind of self-explanatory. With a contract, the government defines the scope of work. They give you a very specific topic that says, we want you to build an X-ray antenna for a submarine that's within these dimensions and these power requirements. Whereas National Science Foundation says, we're interested in electronics. So there's just a huge difference in the approach to these things. The contracting agencies are Department of Defense, NASA, Department of Commerce, DHS, DOT, EPA. NIH has both. They have an omnibus, like a huge program where they just give you general topics. And then once a year or so, they'll put out some real specific topics that say, you know, we need a drug to counteract whatever this thing is that just showed up. The granting agencies are National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, and USDA. So they're much more general topics, and you kind of propose what you want to do to them as opposed to them telling you exactly what they want you to do.
So these over here don't do any of the SBIR approach, or?
Yeah, it's all SBIR.
It's
It's just two different ways of doing an SBIR. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I've done both. And so here are some of the SBIR funded companies that you may not have thought of that would have been SBIR funded. But these are companies that got started through the SBIR program. And we'll talk about IRobot a little bit in a couple slides. Pretty amazing that these great big companies that are so successful started out with just one or two or more. What was that? Yeah. Symantec is virus software. IRobot is the little Roomba
Oh, that's
vacuum
great.
cleaner.
Okay. Yes.
So one of the things that we talk about a lot is what does innovation mean? And for most of the companies that I've worked with, innovation was something completely novel, really brilliant, high tech, whatever. But there's a percentage of the companies that I've worked with that just came up with a better way of doing something. And some of them have been more successful than the ones that had real high tech ideas. So you can't really think of innovation just as being high tech. It comes from all places and can be a whole bunch of different things. We'll talk about it a little bit more as we go through. So the two keys to an SBIR is you have to have innovation and you have to have commercial potential. So I have people come to me and say, I've got this brilliant software solution and it's a really cool idea. And they say, but I want it to be open source. It's like, okay, well, then don't go after SBIR funding, because if it's open source, you're not going to make money, and you have to make money to be successful as an SBIR company. Half of the whole equation nowadays is commercialization.
So how do those open source, like today, this open source business that you fund to, how do they generate? Or do they have another?
So, I mean, if you're doing customer support, you can make money.
Mhm.
If you're doing updates, if you're doing, I mean, there are ways to do it, but for the most part, if you want to do an SBIR,
Right.
you have to be selling something. I mean,
Okay.
you can do things other ways, but if you want to be in the SBIR program, you need to be generating revenue.
Some of the grants, I think there's probably somewhere states how you can volunteer or give those services to the public. And I'm thinking that's probably how it might fit in, because I know some of these ask that you collaborate. They want to see more of how you're giving services as opposed.
Yeah, so there are lots of other funding sources
Right.
that help you do things like that. That's not what this program is for. This program is for generating revenue. And you know, if it's NASA or Department of Defense, they're going to be your customer, so that's how you're going to generate revenue. Although they want it to be commercializable in the public sector also. But yeah, I mean, this whole thing is do something innovative. Phase one, demonstrate feasibility, show that you've got a really good idea. Phase two, build a prototype, and then go make a ton of money. And that's the whole goal of the thing. It's a really neat program. So, yeah, it's a good thing.
So it's all product, not services.
That's a loaded question. Some of it is services. It can be if you have a neat, new, different way of doing something that nobody's tried before. So, yeah, services are included for sure, but it has to be something novel. So it's not just, I want to fund my accounting firm or something. But it's got to be a different way of, you know, if you have a different treatment for post-traumatic stress disorder or something like that, that very well could be funded, but has to be something novel, innovative, and you have to be able to make money doing it. That's kind of the bottom line of the whole thing. For contracting agencies, your end user is the government. They want you to also have public sector uses for this stuff, though. Yeah, and they don't define how it needs to be commercialized. They don't say you need to sell this many of this product in this time. They say, how are you going to make money? And you need to give them a story that says, I've got this great idea and I know what my target market is, and this is how much money I can make doing this. It just has to be a clear, clean story, in my experience. Oh, so this one just says that for granting agencies, the end user will be the public, so they aren't going to be your end user. And so you need to convince them that you have a way to make money outside of the military application or whatever. So for the agencies that are granting agencies, the commercialization part of this is really, really critical. And they want to understand your commercial potential and your path to market. They want to know how you're going to turn this into a bunch of money. Okay, the proposal process. First, you need to determine your eligibility. You have to be a small business, which is less than 500 employees. Almost all of the SBIR companies are 2 to 3 people to start with. My first company, there were 2 of us when we got started. You have to be for profit. You can't be a non-profit. There are other ways to fund nonprofits, but this is not it. You have to be primarily US owned. Usually most of the work has to be done in the US. For DoD, probably all of the work has to be done in the US. And the PI needs to be primarily employed by the small business. And so if you're a professor, maybe you get a postdoc to do it, or a recent grad to do it as the PI, or whatever, or take a sabbatical or whatever.
You get someone else to be the PI.
Yeah,
That's possible.
yeah.
Been work done in the US, but not the product can be sold internationally.
Of course. Well, so there are ITAR regulations for DoD stuff. So if you build something secret that Defense Department needs, they will restrict where you can sell it and release the information and stuff. But those regulations are always spelled out in the solicitation, so you know before you apply for it what the rules are. But they want you to be successful, so if you can sell it all over the place, that's wonderful. Unless it's something that's a national secret, then you can't. So if you meet all those eligibility requirements, do you have something that's really innovative? And a lot of the time, the definition of innovative is in the way you write the proposal, right? So you need to show that you're different from everybody else somehow. And I think that's one of the things that I've been kind of lucky at, is I'm good at figuring out how to write it so it sounds like it's the most brilliant idea ever, even if it's maybe not quite the most brilliant thing ever. The next thing you have to do is you have to go through a series of registrations. These registrations don't take a lot of effort, but they take some time. So you have to form a company, you have to get a DUNS number. The DUNS number comes to you pretty quickly, and then you have to apply it SAM.gov, the Systems for Award Management. And that takes a little bit of time now, because you have to write a letter saying that you really are a small business, and you have to get it notarized and send it in to them. And I've seen the SAM registrations take up to 6 weeks. Usually it's about a week. And then you have to register with the SBA, and that's an overnight thing. And then you have to register with each one of the agencies that you want to apply to. So the point is, don't wait till a week before the submission deadline to do this. You need to get started early, and it's worth just going through the registrations, even if you're not sure you're going to apply, just so you have them in place. Then if you decide you're going to apply, you can get them in. The next thing you have to do is find a topic. And that can be an arduous process. You can go to SBIR.gov and just do a keyword search, but in my experience, you don't really find the right topics that way. I tend to pour through all of the topics for all of the agencies to figure out what might fit or what might be of interest to me or whatever company I'm working with. It takes some work, but I think it's really worth the time. I had a project where they asked for a mass spectrometer that was under 35 pounds that had a certain power requirement and whatever. And I called the guy up and I said, hey, we've got a solution that would weigh under a pound. It's not a mass spec, but it's going to give you the same type of data. And he said, apply. And we did, and we got the award. They funded 5 different companies to do the same project. And so we were just competing against other companies. It was pretty cool. So you don't always have to totally fit the topic area, but it helps if you do. And if you're allowed to contact the people, which varies by agency, of course, contact them and talk to them before, whenever you're allowed to, and say, this is what our solution is. How do we do this? Let's work together and figure out how to fund this.
You roll your eyes as if some agencies are really hard to access.
So NOAA and NIST, you are not allowed to talk to them. NSF and the NIH, you're always allowed to talk to them no matter what. And you should, and you better if you want to get funded by them. Department of Defense has what's called a pre-solicitation. So for a month, you're allowed to talk to them. And then for the next month, if you talk to them, they post all of your questions and answers for everybody to see. So that's why I rolled my eyes, is because they're all different. But if you're allowed to, you should talk to them. And I mean, the NSF and NIH program managers tell me all the time that if you aren't contacting them, you're missing the whole point. I've had situations where we contacted the NIH and we thought we had the right institute, and they said, oh, I'm not the right person to do this project, but let me put you in touch with so-and-so at this other institute. And then they ended up funding us. So if you're allowed to talk to them, talk to them. If you're not allowed to, don't. I mean, Department of Homeland Security never gets back to you. I mean, it varies. So you need to look at the rules. And that's another reason why we're probably a good access point, is we can get you in touch with the right people and tell you whether you're allowed to do that or not. Yeah, so I mean, for every proposal, you're going to have an abstract or a cover page that's really critical to explaining what you're doing and what problem you're solving and stuff. There's going to be a cost proposal. They can be really simple or really complicated depending on how you decide to do it. Question. And kind of the key parts of the thing is a technical proposal, and they vary by agency for how long it is and how much detail you go into and stuff like that. We strongly recommend that you have somebody else review your proposals. We're happy to do it. It's at no cost. The first proposal that I wrote was to the EPA, and I didn't know what I was doing, and I just sent it in, and I said I was going to solve the world's pollution problems in 6 months for $60,000. Yeah, they did the same thing. They laughed. Yeah, it was really bad. I've never gotten reviews like that. It was bad. And so my business partner and I were like, well, we either have to get real jobs or we have to learn how to write these. And so we went and talked to a whole bunch of people about how to write them. And then we wrote a couple to the Air Force, and then we had people review them, and then we redid them, and then we had people review them, and then we redid them, and then we submitted them, and we got both of them funded. So I think it's really critical to have somebody outside look at it, see if you're getting your point across. Even though you know what you're doing, sometimes you bury the whole thing somewhere way too far into it, and you really need to hit them in the face right at the beginning and say, look, here's your problem, and here's how I'm going to solve it, and this is why this is a novel idea. And I mean, I think we all kind of shy away from pushing what our idea is, but in this program, if you're going to have a 14% success rate, you probably ought to really have a competitive proposal, and you ought to really make your point quickly, because they're reviewing a lot of these. The submission part of this, they all have deadlines. Don't wait till the last minute. I worked with a professor at the University of Illinois, and he like called me up 15 minutes before the deadline and said, I can't get this to work. And I said, well, I can't fix it from here, and I can't make it to your office by then. And so he missed the submission deadline. This was for USDA that does it once a year. The next year, he had the same proposal, and he went to put it in, and his computer locked up on him, and he had to reboot, and he missed the deadline again, second year in a row. Third year, he submitted it, and he got funding, and got a phase 2, and got a huge venture investment, and now has a hugely successful company that was delayed by 2 years because of 15 minutes worth of not doing things right. So don't wait till the last minute. The submission sites are better than they used to be, but you always get errors. You always get things that are a pain. Just don't wait till the last minute. Start all of this stuff early. I used to always wait till the last minute, and I can't do it anymore. After you do the submission, then you wait, and it can be, so they tried to make it so it was less than 120 days before you got your notification, but it just doesn't work. EPA still takes almost a year before they tell you that you've gotten your award. Some of the agencies will give you pretty good hints that you're going to get the award by asking you additional questions and stuff, but it's a slow process, and so you just have to be patient. So with Department of Defense, they funded IRobot, the Roomba company. They had 30 DoD awards between 2001 and 2009, over $10 million worth of SBIR funding. 17 phase 1s, 8 phase 2s, now employs 450 people, but it wasn't to build vacuum cleaners. They built vacuum cleaners, but they also built bomb disposal units and IED recovery units. So this goes back to the whole innovation thing. You don't necessarily use an SBIR to build what you're starting with. You use it to build technology. And I'll talk about that a little bit more with my company and how we did things, my first company. So when you think about innovation, think about it much more broadly than just some specific thing. There are lots of different ways to do neat things to solve problems. Now I'm going to talk about the FAST program, Federal and State Technology Partnership Program, FAST. I knew it was in here somewhere. We're what? Yeah.
Do the mission or the directives change of the agencies depending on who's in the White House, what parties in the White House?
Let's go with yes. I mean, the EPA has lost a huge amount of their research budget. So that makes it so There's very little funding for EPA to do things. So one of the things I pay attention to is with Department of Defense, has their research budget changed? So if they're developing the F-22, that's a huge piece of the research budget. And so they've got a ton more money, so that's who you want to go after. NASA changes drastically based on who's decided where we want to go next or how we're going to get there. I mean, so yeah, I think it's critical to pay attention to stuff like that. So this is the New Mexico FAST program that I'm a contractor for.
So this is the website, right?
Yep. We're funded by the SBA. Our goal is to strengthen the competitiveness of small businesses here in New Mexico. There are a bunch of representatives across the country, and we're one of them down at New Mexico State and the Arrowhead Center. We give you free SBIR, STTR proposal development services throughout the entire state. So that's why I'm down here today.
You are from the Mexico State Arrowhead.
Well, I'm contracted by Arrowhead Center, and I'm actually up in Santa Fe, as is Dana, who is the director of the FAST program. Our services, we do free SBIR proposal development. We tailor our services based on the client and what they need and what we can help with. There are micro grants available to help with proposal development and other things. We do free workshops throughout the state. We have lots of SBIR resources on the website. There's a monthly email newsletter, and there's a video podcast series. We have a resource library where we have an agency quick start guide for each agency that tells you how to get started and what to apply for and stuff. And we keep those updated every round because everything changes every time because they just like to do that. We have a YouTube channel with a whole bunch of workshops and short videos on how to register for things and how to apply for things. We have compliance matrices that allow you to check things off to make sure you've done everything you need to do to put in a proposal. We have templates for proposals, executive summaries, budget justifications, letters of support, all of that stuff. We have sample proposals, and we have a solicitation guide. The solicitation guide tells you when each one of the agencies is probably going to come out, and that tends to vary sometimes too. We have micro grants available. These are usually small, somewhere between $500 and $2,000, and can be used for a variety of things. Things like market research, commercialization plan, all kinds of stuff. So if you have a need, just apply through the website and Dana will get back to you and let you know what she can do to help. Yeah, so we do anything we can to help you guys have an easier time putting in a proposal and a winning proposal. Anything that you have a question about, you should let us know. We will help you in any way we can, and if we don't know the answer, we'll find the answer. Use us, we're free. It's a great resource. We've got a ton of experience between the three of us. The SBIR Road Tour is coming up August 14th. This is kind of a unique situation where they put all of the program directors on a bus and drive them around the country, and they're going to stop in Albuquerque, and you get a chance to sit down with the program directors from any one of these agencies, it's a really unique opportunity. It's a really outstanding opportunity. You can present them with what your plan is and what you're thinking about doing, and they will tell you if they're interested or if they're not interested. They will tell you how to slant things to make it so they are interested. It's a really, really valuable resource. It's rare that you would get this kind of access to these kinds of people. So take advantage of it if you have a chance. So now I'm going to talk about my company. I don't do this to brag or anything. It's just, I want to show you how you can start in a program like this and turn it into a company over a period of time. My company was called Caviton. We were in business for about 8 years. It was me and a partner. We got up to 10 employees at one point, and then he got married and had a kid and decided he had to have a real job that wasn't bouncing around all over the place. And so that was the end of the company. So on the other hand, the Air Force was the first ones to fund us, and they helped us and tracked us and followed us through the whole process, and then deemed us a success story. So we're on their website as a United States Air Force success story as a company. We never sold a single product. On the other hand, we did a lot of really neat research and had a lot of fun. It was a really good time. And we used their money to get a lot of follow-on money, and we went a long ways with it. So this was my startup. We did sensors for environmental monitoring. And by environmental monitoring, I mean any environment, all kinds of different environments. And we'll talk about some of those applications when we go through. Started with 2 people. He was an electrical engineer. I'm a biochemist. Very little business experience. I had been a business major for a couple semesters down at State. And I went back and got a certificate for business administration from the university because I just wanted to remember what it was like to do business, because I was supposed to be the business guy and he was the technical guy. We did have a really novel technology. We had a really neat way of doing things. He was using microplasmas to look at molecular spectroscopy. And he said every time he sealed one of these up, he could see contaminants in there. And I said, so doesn't that mean it's a good sensor? And he said, yeah. So that's when we wrote the EPA proposal that got rejected soundly. And then we did the next 2 to the Air Force. What were our keys to success? Well, first, you've got to be innovative, right? We've got a new kind of sensor that nobody's ever seen before, and we can put it anywhere and it can detect just about anything at really, really low levels. That's pretty cool. One of the things we blew early on was scoping the project, right? We're going to solve the world's pollution problems in 6 months. It doesn't work. You need to figure out how to scope these things, how to do a small amount of work for $150,000 in 6 months that shows that this is a good idea. We figured that out for the next 2 proposals that we wrote. Communication with the technical contacts. If you're allowed to talk to them before submission, talk to them. Tell them what your idea is, get their feedback, figure out how to make this a better project. And then communication with the technical team throughout the project was absolutely critical to us, because we built a rapport with the Air Force guys, and then they spread us out to everybody else and introduced us to lots of different people and made us very successful for a long time. Since we were 2 people, we wanted to look like more of a business. So we had a technical advisory board that was my buddy's old advisor and 2 other professors that we said, can we take you out for a beer every 3 months and talk about what we're doing? And they said, sure. So we've got a technical advisory board. Our business advisory board was our attorney, a buddy who's a real estate agent, and another buddy that we took out for beer every 3 months, and they were our business advisory board. And it made us look like we knew what we were doing as a team, right? As a business. This is all about credibility. You really have to show that you're the right people to do this, and you have the right people in place, and you understand that you're going to need a business development person at some point, and you understand that you're going to need more funding than the SBIR program. You have to look like a relevant company. That's the key to this whole thing. I mean, you have to have innovation, you have to have commercial potential, but you have to be the right people to do this, and you have to show them that. One of the keys to success is you got to do good work, right? If you say you're going to do something, you better do it, because if you do it, they're going to give you more money, and if you don't do it, they're not going to give you more money. And if you show them all kinds of really neat data, they take it to other people and they show it to them, and then they bring you somewhere else, and then they fund you. And so that's kind of fun. The other thing that we always tried to do was keep them thinking about the phase 2, because the phase 1 is a little tiny bit of money for a short period of time. Phase 2 can be a lot of money and can lead to a lot of other things. So you always want to keep them thinking about where your project is going, not what you just did last week. So our funding, I said the EPA one just failed miserably. I've never been rejected like that. I have never seen somebody be rejected like that. Since then, it was really bad. So we applied for the Air Force phase 1s, and it was to the same group down at the Air Force. One was performance monitoring of jet engines, and one was health monitoring of jet engines. So one, you're looking at oxygen coming out. One, you're looking at bits of metal coming out. And so we put our sensor behind the thing, and we could measure oxygen and NOx and SOx and all kinds of neat things behind the jet engine. And then we did experiments where we heated up titanium real hot, and we could see the titanium vapors in our sensor. This is the glory of being an entrepreneur, is sitting in a trailer in Tennessee in the middle of the summer, listening to a JT-10 jet engine scream for 18 hours straight with no air conditioning. Except we were well paid to do it, so it was all right. It was pretty miserable. Out of those phase 2s, they gave us, or out of those phase 1s, they gave us a phase 2 to continue the work. And then they gave us a phase 2B, which is, at that point wasn't really a thing. They just gave us more money because they wanted us to keep working. They've still got one of our sensor systems down there at Arnold Engineering Development Center, and they still use it and talk about us and whatever. They actually call me Mr. SBIR because I made them give me tons of money. So we took that, the phase 2 data that was on titanium, and we went to the EPA and we said we can do multiple metals monitoring out of smokestacks, right? Environmental monitoring, same thing as a jet engine, it's no different. So they wanted us to show that we could detect 7 different metals. We built a system, and we put our same sensor in that system and heated it up and detected 7 different metals and showed the EPA that we could do that. They gave us a phase 2, and we did further development on that system, and almost got to the point of a product, but not quite. So while this was all going on, our Air Force buddies took us down to Tyndall Air Force Base and introduced us to some real high up people that thought what we were doing was really cool. And so they said, we don't want to fund it, but we know some people that do. And so they sent us to the Marine Corps. And the Marine Corps is what I mentioned earlier, where they said, we want this certain thing. And we said, well, we've got something totally different, but it works better. And they said, okay, we'll fund you. And so they gave us a phase 1. We then did some work for Indiana Department of Homeland Security, looking at chemical warfare agent detection. And then the Air Force guys came back to us and said, hey, we heard about a project that Honeywell is doing with a bunch of really big companies, and we want you to participate in it because your sensor would be great. So we did a project for Department of Energy doing process gas detection. And it was a big project. It wasn't SBIR anymore. It was big. And that was fun because we had our logo there with like Exxon and Department of Energy and Honeywell and a bunch of people on their slides. And we're still a 10-person company at that point. Then the Air Force people came back to us and said, hey, there's this project at DARPA that's a really, really big project to do chemical warfare agent detection. And we want you to work with Honeywell on that. And so Honeywell called us up and said, hey, DARPA has requested that we do some work with you, and we want to put in a proposal. And we put in a proposal and got a huge project. So this is kind of how, you know, I started out as a total failure and then learned how to do this and then worked with the people and made everybody happy and kept everybody happy. And then they gave us more and more work. And when they build trust with you, they are much more willing to hand you money because they know you're going to do good work. So it's just kind of a cute little story about how you take a little 2-person company and do some fun stuff. So after my buddy left for his real job, I started a consulting company. The first day that I started my consulting company, a venture capitalist came in and said, so we have a company that you know of, and we just fired everybody. And we want you to come in and look at the technology and see if this is a viable company, because they asked for another 10 million in research, and we're not going to put in 10 million in research. And so I went in and started assessing the technology and built a team and started writing proposals and bringing in money and stuff. And we got money from the Army, not through the SBIR program, but through another program. We got an NSF phase 1 and phase 2, EPA phase 1 and phase 2, NIH phase 1 and phase 2, and really built up a nice company that's now selling products that they eventually got rid of me because they didn't want to do research anymore. They wanted to sell products. I then went on and wrote a proposal with my dad and his company to the Department of Transportation. So if you notice, I've gotten funding from a whole bunch of the different agencies. That's not the normal way to do things. It's not a fun way to do things. It's a hard way to do things, but it ends up that I've got lots of experience with all the different agencies. So I guess that's good. We actually did a project for Department of Transportation where we put sensors and camera on my motorcycle and did near miss behavior and vehicle miles traveled for Department of Transportation. I thought the funny part about that was I would ride my motorcycle around, almost crash and die on a regular basis, and then send all the data to my dad for analysis. Really? So after I got done with a lot of those projects, the University of Illinois research part came to me and said, you've got a ton of experience. Will you help us review proposals and edit proposals and help people do this and give workshops and stuff? And so I was funded through the same program that the FAST program is funded through the SBA, Economic Development Agency, and spent 5 years reviewing proposals and helping people put proposals in. I've worked with over 200 proposals, well, over 200 companies, substantially more proposals than that. And we've had a pretty good success rate. At the University of Illinois, while I was there, at the research park, we brought in $56 million worth of SBIR funds over 5 years. So we've got some experience doing this, but I missed New Mexico. So I came back to my beautiful state and want to help you all be successful in doing wonderful things.
We have students from Navajo Tech University, and getting them, when they think about business and they think about going into business and they mention, I want to do this and I want to do that, and business entrepreneurship, it always comes down to how do I write a business plan.
Yeah, so an SBIR proposal is a business plan in effect, and it's a really nice outline that tells you exactly how to do it, and it walks you through how to do this.
That's good.
I mean, I think it's a really helpful thing. I also think that writing business plans is kind of a weird thing, because if you're doing it to get venture funding, it's probably not going to happen unless you know the VC real well. You can't just send them a business plan, have them fund you. It doesn't happen. So that's why I think this program is really critical, is because it demonstrates that some federal agency said, wow, that's a really great idea. So, I mean, if you've got something innovative. Now, if you want to make a lawnmower business like I did in high school, this program doesn't help you, and you need to actually write a business plan. But it's a good format to think about how to build a business, what you need, and how you do it. Okay, questions? I covered it all perfectly. Great.
Very interesting.
It's a neat program. I mean, it's challenging, but if you play it right, you can do some fun stuff.
So we at the Innovation Center and Karma are exploring this new area. We consider it new because oftentimes we're told that for our Native American constituents, we don't get to learn about it or participate in it. So somehow we have to test the waters at some point. So Arrowhead Center is a very close partnership with us in Karma. We also have access to consultants. And I am proud to say that through our team and our consultant, we actually got 100,000 in first phase to do a culturally entrepreneurial platform. It could be technology, but it also is a process, ideas, ideas. And so we're in phase 2 of that, being considered for phase 2. So, but then again, the National Science Foundation is very interested in the model that we're doing. So they're also trying to rethink the model in terms of how they work with Native Americans, because our situation is sort of very different. And so how do we design our university, our students? We have bright students right here who's about to come up with a new product. So all those things are in play for us, I think. And, you're welcome to come here. We know Zeddy and her bunch down there, very close partnership in Del Mecki as well. So we have these resources, access to resources.
Yeah, we're available. I mean, use us.
Yeah.
Anything we can do to help.
There's a lot of experience there. We tap the professors too for partnerships on some of these applications because they need the science backgrounds, look at the potential.
I think USDA, with their current focus on rural development type issues, I mean, it may be a real good program for people down here to think about, see what they're interested in, because there's just a huge focus on what they call underserved populations. And I mean, that's all of my beautiful state of New Mexico.
Women entrepreneurs is very, very high.
Yeah.
Also. Take advantage, please.
Yeah, they dominate, don't they?
So like, what kind of tips would you have for me as a grant writer in creating a grant and writing a grant?
So first, you need to understand who your audience is, who you're writing this to. If you're writing it to the National Institutes of Health and it's the Institute on Aging and you write a proposal on diabetes, you're probably going to the wrong people. If you're going to the National Science Foundation, you need to have the scientific, technical veracity of a scientific paper to go there because you're going to be judged by people that are experts in your field. If it's USDA, you need to understand that their focus right now is on rural development. I mean, there are other things that they'll fund, but really they're trying to help underserved communities. And so, I mean, first is you need to understand your audience. Second is you need to understand, I mean, so most grants, they'll give you an evaluation criteria at some point in the solicitation that says how they're going to evaluate you. And if you don't hit all of those points, you're not going to be successful. You need to go through those and check them off, make sure that you hit every one of those things. The other thing is most of these grants, they're reviewing a whole bunch of them. So if your abstract isn't really clean, if you don't really get your point across right up front, they're not going to review it. They won't even look at it. You need to follow the rules because they'll do an administrative release of it. They'll just throw it out if you didn't follow the page count and the margins and the font, all the minutia that you don't really care about.
And the evaluation.
And then I think that, so there's a guy at the National Science Foundation named Ben Schrag who's pretty much running the SBIR program now. And I've known him for 10 years now or so. And he's an interesting guy. What he says he looks for in a proposal is why this, why now, and why them. So it's, you know, why is this a good idea? What problem does it solve? Why should I be funding you? And then why now is, what is it about technology that has changed? Or what is it about this technology that's different? So your 19% increase in efficiency, that's the why now, is we developed something that's different from everybody else, that's better than anybody else. Or there's a new computer technology or a new chip or a new sensor available that nobody's been able to play with before that we're using. So, and then why them is the critical part to anybody who's going to invest in you. Is who are you? Are you the world's expert in what this is? Are you the right person to do this? And if you're the right team to do this, that's the most important part. So I think it's that whole picture, right? It's you're selling yourself. This is a sales document. You need to demonstrate that you know what you're doing, that you've got a brilliant idea, and you're the right person to do it. And if you're competing against another 100 proposals, you better be better than the rest of them. And you know, it's like I said earlier about my company. If you're just a one-person company or a two-person company, try and find a way to make yourself look bigger. If you don't have a lot of experience, try and make it look like you have more experience. Don't lie, but you know, if you can get certifications or take a class or anything to make it a little more credible, it's all about credibility. It's all a sale.
You know, when you mentioned the service site, my brain has started to work on in this area a service with an app for elderly care, and getting them mobilized would quite easily be able to get the Department of Health, SBIR funded, I think. we had an app that was being developed and processed that helped coordinate healthcare and activity care and so forth, you know, but that's in conjunction with the service. There's a lot of senior citizen centers all over the country that actually be able to use something like this. So the market would be very broad for this development, something like this.
It's a very busy space.
Well, it's also a product.
Yeah, it is, correct. It's a product and a service.
Yeah, but I mean, his point is right. As an app for $1.99, that's not going to be funded by this program. It's just not. You're not going to make enough money to be anywhere near worth it. But as a service, it very well could be worth a lot of money. So, I mean, that's why there are so many nuances to this. And you have to figure out, you know, I have people come to me all the time saying, I've got this wonderful idea for an app. And it's like, wow, that's a really great idea. But if you don't have a hardware aspect to it or service aspect to it or whatever, it's just not, I mean, it doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It doesn't mean it's a bad business plan. I mean, it could be great. You could make $1 million and that would be really fun. There's nothing wrong with $1 million. But with the SBIR program, they want you to make $100 million, $20 million. So you have to have a way of commercializing whatever the technology is for this program. There are lots of other fun things you can do in life. This is just one approach.
You mentioned the IP. So going into a grant or holiday contract, will that also help cover the purchase of an IP, because you have to go through all of that process?
So the SBIR program does not allow funds to be spent on intellectual property. Also on advertising. Now the caveat there is 7% of your budget is fee. It's just profit. You can do whatever you want with it.
Right.
So you can take that, you know, $10,500 out of your phase one and use it for whatever you want. You can buy a car, you can get a patent, you can do whatever you want. So you could work with it, but you can't put that in your budget, which I always thought was stupid, but they don't ask me. So.
How much is budgeted for salary?
So typically, well, I mean, it completely varies by agency and by project and whatever, but that's the largest line item for sure on every project. I mean, these are made to do research, so it's almost all personnel costs. The only other major cost is your overhead cost, and that gets fairly complicated when we talk about
Does
that.
that salary also account for your credentials, your associates to your?
Yeah. So
Is that also
we
based on
usually
that?
use Bureau of Labor Statistics numbers.
Mhm.
And so if you go in and you say, I'm a PhD in math in Albuquerque, it'll say, with this much experience, you make this much money. And it'll give you a labor rate. So that's the easy way to do it. The other way to do it is if you actually have a labor rate because you're being paid by the company, you could just use that, justify it that way. So I mean, it kind of varies, but yeah, personnel cost is 80% of the proposal or 70% of the proposal.
Are they built-in, like we do, our company has a grant, and every quarterly we ask for an update, correct? How the project's going? Does the SBIR ask for that?
So Department of Defense wants monthly reports and a final report. National Science Foundation only requires a final report, but if you aren't contacting your program manager monthly, you're blowing it. So all of the agencies vary, but like I said, the key to this whole thing is to communicate with them as much as you can There's a guy at the NSF that I did a NSF phase 1 with, and he said, I sent in my first report and I said, everything's going great. And he called me up and he said, I don't want to hear everything's going great. I want to hear what the problems are. I want to hear what your challenges are. I don't, you know, you wrote the proposal. I know you're going to tell me everything's great, but I want to know what the challenge is, because I want to help you through that challenge, and I want to make sure that we get that fixed so we can give you follow-on funding so you're a successful company. They want more than anything for you to be successful. And I don't think we all realize that when we're writing the proposals and begging for money and trying to do work, but they'll work their butts off for you, and they'll introduce you to other people, and they'll keep you moving forward for a long time.
Has there ever been a grant taken away in the middle of the project?
That's an interesting question. So with the granting agencies, for the most part, when they give you the money, it's your money. If you do something really bad, waste, fraud, and abuse is a bad thing to do. There was a guy in Champaign, Illinois, that got a grant from Department of Education. It wasn't SBIR, it was a bigger grant. And he remodeled his kitchen and bought a car. And they found out, and they went after him for 3 times the amount of the grant. So don't want to do bad things with this money. I saw a talk by one of the OSBI guys, the auditing people, and he had just these hilarious pictures. You know, somebody's doing all this lab work, and he goes to the address, and it's a hair salon. It's like, huh. Or, you know, people taking money and sending it all to Russia to have the work done. No, that's not good. So, no, they won't take the money away. No, you won't get in trouble. Even if you're unsuccessful, you still get all the money. Even if you tell them that the whole project is blown, they'll say, hey, is there some other direction we can go? I mean, they bought into you, so they believe in you and they'll help you. I've never heard of somebody having the money taken away unless you do something really criminal.
Right.
And then, so don't do that. Yeah, I think, you know, the whole thing is, if you blow the phase 1, you don't get a phase 2. If you do what you said you were going to do in phase 1, you pretty much get a phase 2. So, and with the grants, they pretty much hand you the money. There's not really, they don't even track it for the most part. You know, you should keep good books and stuff, but they aren't going to audit you on a grant. Whereas the contracts, they will audit you and make sure that you did everything you were supposed to do and kept timesheets and all that stuff. So there is a big difference between the agencies. There's also a big difference in how the agencies pay you, which is kind of interesting. So National Institutes of Health takes all the money and puts it in an account, and you just draw it down as you spend it. National Science Foundation gives you $100K up front, and then $50K when you send in your final report. So you're supposed to be spending that money while you're doing the project, except there's $50K that's not part of what you're spending. So that's nice. Department of Defense, you do 30 days of work, and then you send them an invoice, and then they have 30 days to pay you. So you do 60 days worth of work before you get your first payment, which is interesting if you have employees. It's all right if it's 2 guys in a garage, but if you have employees, it doesn't work so well.
So how many projects do you do for Navajo? Just like
None that I know of.
none?
That's why we're here.
So once you get approved, then you get other sources of financing through or leverage your contract award to get other financing.
So I know of several venture capital firms that will match SBIR funding. SBIR, some of the programs have some matches. The state right now has a matching program for SBIR, but I don't know how much money is there. So yeah, there are resources and we can help you find those resources. There are also, I mean, sometimes you can get a bank loan based on the receivables that you have coming in. I mean, yeah, there are options, but it's not easy. I mean, for the most part, I mean, in my experience, we just did what we could. You know, between phase 1 and phase 2 for that Air Force, the first Air Force one, the guys disappeared. We couldn't get in touch with them for like 3 months. And it was like, okay, you know, they told us we were going to get this, but we're not going to get this. And then they called us back and they had some exchange program with Saudi Arabia. And so they went over to Saudi Arabia for 3 months, and then the Saudi Arabians came over here for 3 months. And so we went 6 months without any funding whatsoever. We were about to hang it up, and then they were like, oh yeah, here's your money. Here's $650,000 for 2 guys. Oh, thanks.
So is that Dana that's on the phone?
No, Dell's on the phone. Dana might be on the phone.
How can we get this line? Will you be emailing this line?
We'll just email it out. Yeah, and we'll email an evaluation form so you guys can make fun of me. Anything else?
So probably the best approach for like starting is to probably call you and make an appointment and go over like the ideas that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or email or something.
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing to do first is look at the idea, figure out how we frame that as innovative, and figure out what agency would be a fit and that stuff. And then we figure out the submission deadlines, and then we do the registrations, and then we start putting together a proposal. When I do a proposal, the first thing that I do is write the abstract. The second thing I do is put the figures together, because when they review these things, what they're going to do is read the abstract, and if they're interested, they're going to flip through it. And if you have beautiful figures that explain what you're doing in clear terms with figure headings that explain the figures clearly, they'll look through those, and then they'll understand what you're doing, and then they'll read the proposal. They've got a big stack of these, and they'll just throw them out if they don't like the abstract. So first thing I do is the abstract. Second is the figures. Then when I'm feeling creative, I work on the technical part of it. When I'm not feeling creative, I work on the budget and the other junk, the facilities and equipment and the bios and all that stuff. And then put the whole thing together, and then I redo the abstract. And then I take it to somebody and I have them review it. And then I get it back and I make their changes, and then I redo the abstract.
And you do this.
No, I don't do that. No, I'm the one that reviewed it. I was that little step right at the end of it.
And there are sample proposals.
Yeah, but I mean, we have them, and you can look at them, and that's fine.
It's not a template, it's not a technical.
Yeah, to me, I just, you know, it's like hiring a grant writer. You can hire me. You can give me $5,000. I'll write your grant. I'll do it. And sometimes they get funded, but it has to be the person with the passion that does it, that has the real detailed knowledge that does it. So we're much better in the role of, hey, I read this and I really think this third paragraph ought to be the first one, because that's where you're making your real point. And I would move this figure here because it's not in the right order, or I would change your abstract because you didn't say anything about your team, or, I mean, we're really good at looking at those points of, you aren't getting your point across. You just sound like you're the same as everybody else. And when we talked on the phone, you said this was the most brilliant thing I've ever heard of, and you wrote it and it just looks normal. That's what we're really useful for, is just, and you know, if you give it to us real early on, we can do a lot to help you. If you give it to us the day before submission, we can spell check it. I mean, and well, that's what happens. And every once in a while, we get somebody that says, okay, here's my outline and here's my first version of my abstract. What do you think? Oh, it's heaven, right? You just start from scratch and you say, oh, no, this is in the wrong order and you need to change this and get your point across. And, you know, it's like, so one of the proposals I wrote to National Science Foundation that actually Ben Schrag, that I was talking about earlier, reviewed, I got rejected. And this was just a few years ago. And I've been doing this for a long time, and I thought I was pretty good at it, and I got rejected. And so I called him up and I said, hey, the reviewers' comments aren't really that bad, and I'm trying to figure out why I got rejected. And he said, because you did the whole thing backwards. I said, what do you mean? And what we were doing is we were going to do a performance monitoring system for a heat pump in a house. So it would monitor vibrations and temperatures and pressures and all that stuff. And then if something went wrong, it would know what had gone wrong and it would automatically order the part. So you could have the part delivered and installed without having your air conditioning go down in the middle of the day and not have the part for a week because you didn't know what was going on. And it's like, wow, you know, this is a pretty cool idea. And, you know, they said all kinds of stuff on the comments. And I was like, you know, their comments don't really make sense. And Ben was like, no, I don't care about their comments. And really, their comments had nothing to do with it. You did the whole thing backwards. You said you're going to build the system in phase 1, and then you're going to figure out the algorithm in phase 2. That doesn't fly. The hard part is the algorithm. I want you to do the algorithm in phase 1, because phase 2, that's a simple engineering problem. And it was like, God, I should have known better, but you know, you just don't think about things the right way sometimes. I mean, really, phase 1, they want you to solve a really hard problem and demonstrate that this is a feasible way of doing things. And we said, we're going to do the easy part in phase 1. Nope.
So what are the deadlines?
They're all totally different. Yeah. I mean, NSF is now constant. They just have 2 6-month windows, so you can apply at any time. And we have some cards and stuff that are online that tell you all those dates for all the different agencies.
What if your idea, someone else is already doing the same thing? Do they try to connect the two of you together to work it out? Or how does that go? Or is it just like someone else is doing this?
I think it kind of depends on the agency and depends on what you're doing and stuff. For the most part, they don't do that. But every once in a while, they'll say, hey, we want you to work with these people. But usually, I mean, that's like I was talking about with Honeywell. It was usually when you're a little further along and you've done some promising stuff, but they think you need a real company to help you.
Mm-hmm. I can answer some more questions. Cookies, what?
So in the example of your proposal that you did backwards, could you not make the corrections and resubmit the following cycle both?
We decided not to. We decided to build the system. And so we've now built the system and we're trying to decide if we're going to go back and propose the algorithm part of it.
But
Yeah,
You could
you,
have,
you are allowed to go back.
like the person who missed it by 15 minutes continued to, finally got it.
I couldn't believe him. Oh, God. I was going to kill him. 2 years in a
That's
row.
incredible, and then there's a funding.
So, say you submit your proposal and everything, like well in advance, say a month or 2 months in advance before the deadline date. Okay, so here it is, the week before the deadline is going to come up. Can you go back in and edit?
Yeah,
Okay.
up until the deadline. Some of them are really easy to go in and edit, and some of them are really hard to go in and edit. So there's a difference. But
Oh,
yeah, everybody's got their own submission system, which is
Right.
nice. You'd hate to have that uniform.
uh-huh.